We had quite a few people signed up, so maybe they'll watch the recording later. Um, but it's too bad because, of course, the discussion about a book, it's nice to actually be in the discussion to discuss, as it turns out. So I hope everybody loved this book. I had made a couple attempts to read it over the last years, and for one reason or another, picked it up and put it down, which isn't typically something I do. And this is obviously a topic that to me is more interesting or compelling than just about anything going on out there. And so, one way to force yourself to do something is to invite everybody you know to do it with you. But I really, really was quite moved by the book and really, I learned a lot in it, and I thought it was quite a profound story. And I hope that all of you felt the same way. Um, I think it's beautifully written, and there's a lot to learn from it, both practically speaking, but also, it speaks to the spirit of tea, but also I feel like has a really nice balance of kind of science and poetry and history and really brings to life so much of what pu'er tea in particular is about. And so part of my intention in wanting to share it with everyone was to try and connect us more for tea lovers to the place of origin and to the way of life in this place. And I'm going to share a little bit just at the beginning here to connect me to Yunnan. And, at Living Tea, we focus so much on pu'er tea, and it's kind of a central focus of the company. But also for me personally, it's been a primary focus of my journey with tea. Um, and then we'll get into some specific questions. And then, of course, this is intended to be a discussion. So hopefully those questions will elicit some thought-provoking ideas. Um, so the reason I want to share a little bit personally is because I came across some very interesting information towards the end of the book that I found sort of coincidental. And I don't remember exactly what the line is in the book, but it's something like there are no coincidences. I can't remember it exactly. Hopefully somebody can help me out with that at some point.
No coincidence, no story.
No coincidence, no story. So, um, around 2007, I was drinking some really nice pu'er. It was probably the first really nice aged pu'er that I had had in a tea house in San Francisco. And I picked up this book off a shelf and opened it, and it was the poetry of Bai Sao, who's kind of a important character in the history of tea. And the poem was customers sitting idly forget host and guest. They drink a cup of tea. Their long sleep ends. Awakened, they realize they're the same as before. And something in that poem and this aged poor in the moment inspired my wish to visit the place of origin and to really go to where the old tea trees grow. And I've been devoted to tea ever since, and I've traveled to Yunnan many times to learn from the people and to sit with the trees and the landscapes and to connect with these older traditions. And what strikes me now is that Baisao doesn't say that the guests become different people. They awaken and recognize that they're the same as before. And tea changes this quality of perception in our way of perceiving, and it reveals what was already present but unseen. And this is, to me, a really central theme of this book. So in 2010, during my first journey through Asia to study tea, I found the Bana Tea Company website, and it was this wealth of knowledge. And I read everything that Linda Louie had written about pu'er on that website. For like a week, I was in Bangkok, and I was just spending all day on this website because I found this treasure trove about pu'er tea. And Linda later brought Lisa C., the author of the book, to Yunnan on the research journey behind this novel. And if you read in the epilogue, she talks about meeting this woman who invited her on a sourcing trip. So in like 2013, 2014, Lisa traveled with Linda, and I think she feels very indebted to her for how much she learned on that trip. And then I also met Master Lu Li Jun in Taiwan, and he's mentioned multiple times in the book, whose quiet work has helped revive the entire modern puer trade. And both of these people are remarkably humble, and you can meet them and never know how much they really shaped the history of tea. And so those convergences suggest a phrase that stayed with me. As the person seeks the leaf also seeks the person. And most of you who study tea with Living Tea or with Global Tea Hut, with Wuda, have heard this phrase, and it's mentioned later in the book, right? It comes up as we seek the leaf, so the leaf seeks the man or the woman. And that's so central to the entire book, right? What is this thread that's pulling everybody together in these sort of magical ways? And that brings us to this question: what is the universal in the language of tea? And what must remain particular to the people and places from which the tea comes? So, tea crosses borders and it can transmit attention, hospitality, memory, bodily knowledge, and belonging. Yet it never comes from nowhere. And Nanuo Mountain, which of course this book is so much about that region, cannot be separated from the Aka community and the Aka tribe. The forests, the labor, the history, and the generations of knowledge that made its tea possible. So, as a Westerner, and I'm obviously not Chinese, and I sell Chinese tea, I really try to honor the birthplaces of these teas. Um, and that's why I wanted to share this book, one of the reasons. And, this love of tea, there's an important passage where um, the tea master, whose name I have written down, I'm forgetting it now, he says to really study tea or to live a life of tea, one must love tea. And I think love creates this responsibility, honoring the people behind the leaf, supporting old tree conservation, remaining a student, and, admitting what you don't know. Um, so I want to speak for a moment about the tea cake with the golden threads and the mother tree. The tea cake's not just a clue, right? It carries the mother's love, it carries the daughter's origin, it carries the memory of the mountain, and it carries a relationship that survives separation in the book. So perhaps tea's universal language is not that it says the same thing to everyone. Perhaps it makes relationships perceptible between the leaf and the land, between the past and the present, between craft and time, and between the person who offers the tea and the person who receives it. So, I wanted to open with this question, which is before we move into the human relationships in the book, um, I want to begin with the tea itself. So, the question is, what does tea carry in this novel that words alone cannot? So, one thing I want to suggest is that try to give the heart of your response in about a minute so that we can hear from multiple people. Um, and if the conversation starts to get too abstract, we'll come back to like the scene or the character or an object or something specific so that we can actually stay with the book. There's so many directions you can go with exploring a book like this, but I think if we don't try to keep it a bit focused, we'll end up somewhere other than the book. And I'd really love for us to kind of explore what was most alive for us in reading it. So again, the first question is, what does tea carry in this novel that words alone cannot? And if nothing significant's coming up, I can also offer some prompts that could bring us a little deeper into that question.
Hi there. I'm Julie. Is it okay this is my first time joining you all in a book study.
Well,
So
this
I'm
is our
pretty,
first one, so you're right on.
oh, cool. Okay, great. Oh my goodness. Awesome. So I hope it's just okay. I could have raised my hand. I apologize.
Just jump in.
Okay, great. It's interesting because I'll be honest, I've only read halfway through the book and I'm riveted by it. I really appreciate the story. And sorry, my dog now is, of course, getting excited because I am. Um, sorry, he's gonna bark at me. Hang on. Jack, there. Okay, thank you. I will calm myself down. Yes, I've read halfway through the book. I've been serving tea now for about a year. And so I thought I want to deepen my practice and have a better understanding of the tea history and where it comes from. And I guess tea carries in the book this idea that we all transcend all the experiences that we're having, that we are all, I know I might be going a little above and beyond here, but that we're all spirit, that we're all light, whatever you choose to believe, right? But that essential inner quality of ourselves. And the story is one of love. And essentially, that's what we're all trying to experience here on this earth. And tea, I think, when you sip quietly with people and you allow the silence and then the conversations that come through afterwards are beautiful. And so, just going, like I said, I'm halfway through the book, but I'm really intrigued about how tea changes people's lives, both financially, emotionally, materialist. Like it transcends everything, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think this, Julia, when you finish the book, you're going to be completely blown away by the role of tea in it. Not just as a symbol, but also as like a character in the book itself. This cake in the book doesn't only represent the bond between Leon and Haley. It performs the bond. And so
Mm,
it carries this kind of like material history of the mountain, of the mother's intention, across this separation that language can't cross. And so you'll see this bond that the tea creates, which I think speaks to what you're saying about love and about this bond. And to me, those golden threads that are woven through it that can't be found anywhere in any other tea anywhere else in Yunnan, those golden threads are speaking specifically to the bond between mother and daughter. But it's the mother tree, and then you have the Amma, the grandmother, and then the mother, and then Haley, and this woven thread, right? So anyhow, I'm gonna shut up and let other people talk. But
I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Roberta. I'm from Mexico, and um, what a treat this book has been. Wow. So I just wanted to get that out. And regarding with tea, for me in the book, the moment that I could like really sense that question for me was when uh, I get confused by all the Chinese names, but um, Leon or Lin, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, she is auditioning or doing the tea ceremony with the tea master's son to go be able to do the training for both lanes and being a tea master and being a tea whatever. The other thing I don't remember the word. And when the tea master son asks her to take out her tea from her mother, and when they all taste it together, like for me, that was the moment where they're actually tasting the tea. And for me, in that moment, I remember reading the book and thinking, wow, how incredible that this tea can carry all this wisdom. And it felt like, yeah, just like not only the wisdom of her lineage, like the human wisdom in it, but like the actual wisdom of the earth and the trees themselves. So that's what it felt to me, and it and it did occur to me while reading that specific part of the book. So I wanted to share that.
Mm.
I have something to say. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm up in Canada here. I really was struck by the whole story is about women and the feminine energy of tea and the yin aspect of tea and how it connects women through the ages and the softening that tea does in it plays a role softening the story every step of the way. It softens the teenager's heart from feeling like she's separate. It softens the mother. It softens the grandmother who goes against tradition in so many ways to hold on. She knows, no coincidence, no story. This daughter is part of our lineage, even though she's not meant to be. I almost stopped reading the book after the first chapter. I'm not going to lie. It was so violent and so upsetting, but so well told to look at kind of the intensity with which women are treated in the world, and then the contrast of the masculine, I would say like it's a short part of the book, but the opium is very much like the masculine plant in this story, stealing away the men. So I was just really, there's so much feminine energy in this book, and there's so many layers of feminism um, and tradition that like we could go into that for hours. But I just think that the tea was the ultimate woman.
Yeah, I think this question of like what can tea communicate through texture, through chi, through the experience in the body, through memory, through value, through origin, through place of origin, connecting us to something in origin. When we talk about chi, it's often this esoteric idea, cha chi, or through the experience of the body. There's a beautiful scene in the book where um, Lian is drinking tea with the tea master, and she first experiences Huigan and the return of sweetness, right? The sweet flavor that she says she feels her chest open, and all of a sudden she can breathe deeply and has this sort of overwhelming physical bodily experience. And I think when people talk about tea in feminine terms, right? That can be this very poetic way of talking about tea. Um, but when we come to the level of sensation, of heightened perception, of seeing something clearly that we couldn't see, but that was always there, like in the Bai Sao poem, of memory all of a sudden, of spaciousness to see our lives more clearly. Um, in some ways, there's a very yin quality to all of that, right? To the body, the experience in the body of tea, of returning us to our bodies. And there's this really interesting juxtaposition happening throughout the whole book, which is about the economics of tea, the science of tea, the value of it, the using GPS to find these old growth trees, the influence of technology, all of this, right? And how the influence that it has for profit seeking, for Site to become deceptive, right? For um, people to start losing their traditional ways, and this constant pull between tradition and progress or modernity. And what these teas keep bringing people back to is back to the heart, back to the body, back to tradition, back to place of origin. to memory. And if you think about this line, like you're talking about the female line, right, of the remembering the kind of lineage through this feminine quality of remembrance, you know? Um, and, I want to actually talk a moment about if anybody else wants to share something else about what T carries in the novel that words alone can't, then please share. But otherwise, I kind of want to shift into the next section or question. Speak
I
now
just,
or forever. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
yeah, I just had something very present for me. Um, and the coincidence, I went to the Portland Tea Festival recently, and the first person I met was Linda, and I didn't know who she was, and we started talking about the book, and then she just opened up and was like, "Oh, I was the one who took Lisa to do the her research." So it was just, yeah, a funny coincidence for me. Um, to me, I feel like the tea carries the truth of who you are. And like on our journey, it's so easy to get lost. It's so easy to not like parts of ourselves. It's so easy to maybe not like where we came from or our past. And to me, the tea kind of represented her essence and the things that you can't really escape. Um, and winding up in places or going in directions you think you should go, but there's something that's always calling you back to that essence of who you are. And I feel like tea and other practices like tea, that's what it does for me, is it kind of like just takes me back to the truth of who I am and the love of self, I guess. Um, so to me, I really saw uh, yeah, there's this essence that we can't escape. And um, once we fully accept it, it actually turns into one of our greatest gifts and the love for who we really are.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that
You're
reflection.
welcome.
No, there's that this human theme of um, for Haley, like, is love enough to give the child a sense of belonging? And there's that tension throughout it of her feeling displaced, but at the same time feeling the love of her mother. And like can Haley have two mothers without diminishing either of those relationships? Right? Um, and like, what does belonging require? What does a feeling of belonging require? And I think when we drink these old growth teas, the wisdom of these old trees as a Shen tonic, and it bringing us into our hearts more and into our bodies, there's a feeling of the interconnection with all of life, the human family, the mother tree, as in like Mother Nature as a mother as well. Um, and to your point, often a putting down of the burden of the aspects of our past or our place of origin that are hard to carry, right? I don't know if everybody has that experience, but often, there's this sense of dropping in when you're drinking really good tea of kind of putting down the tensions that we carry from the difficulties of our childhood or our familial relationships or whatever, of arriving back to a more essential truth, um, which is that really in the heart, or in Taoist terminology, the Shen, when we're resting in the Shen, um, there's a sense of oneness, right? That is inviolable and untouched by the difficulties of life or the abuses or traumas or whatever has happened in life. We connect with, there's an acupuncture point in the center of the chest called primordial child. And it's about the child, the part in us that has not been affected by all of life's difficulties, right? And in some ways, that's a central theme for a lot of the characters, right? If you think about, oh, I'm forgetting the woman who, I'm forgetting her name. I'm terrible with names, but who becomes homeless and a beggar, and then she's brought back into the family. Um, how she's able to reconnect with this part of herself that's really untouched. Deja, thank you. When Deja is she receives this love from her old friend and she's able to reconnect with her origins, you know? So much of the book is about reconnecting with our origins in a wholesome way. Or even like Mr. Huang, right? When later in the book, Leon finds out that what's actually been motivating him the entire time is his love for his son. You know, it like completely transforms her experience of him, and what's actually been motivating him is love the whole time, right? So we just see over and over and over again that really the deeper motivations for all these people is love and their relationships and their care for others. And I think tea as an expression of that care comes through over and over and over again if we return to it from its essential play or to its essential place. And that actually carries us into the thing that I wanted to kind of transition into, which is tea as poetry, science, and practice. So we have this really interesting juxtaposition in the book of the poetic descriptions of tea as, you know, connecting us to the sun and moon and bird song and the poetry of what happens when you drink tea and all this. And then like Haley's project at Stanford, right? Where it's all about theoflavins and polyphenols and catechins and double-blind controlled studies. And it's a very scientific approach. And I think, you know, people have different ways of approaching tea, but tea doesn't ask us to choose poetry or science. It asks us whether we can become precise in more than one language, in more than one relationship to it, and whether knowledge can deepen reverence rather than replace it. You know, I've experienced so much having a tea company now for 16 years of people saying, oh, well, you guys are talking about ceremony and ritual and practice and all of this and these Taoist ideas that um, it's all marketing. And it kind of breaks my heart a little bit because it's so untrue, meaning like what we're doing is really trying to share authentically what we love about tea. And at the same time, I'm interested in the science of tea, you know, so the ecology and cultivars, the chemistry and processing, the microbial activity that creates pu'er tea, storage, you know, etc. Um, but I think one of the things the thing that ties together sort of a scientific approach to tea and a poetic or a spiritual approach to tea is can we study the mechanism of tea without reducing the mystery of it? And can we receive the beauty of tea without erasing its sources, its origin? So I wanted to kind of open up this question of how one approaches tea, whether it's through poetry or science or ritual or practice, how it shows up in the book, and maybe what did you discover? What felt alive for you? What did you find interesting about that exploration? So to give the question a little more poignancy, what is the universal in the language of tea?
Uh, I first just want to say I love your questions and the depth that you go to. It's really yeah, it's really something. Um, and I really love this question a lot because I feel like some people are just more geared towards the scientific and logical approach, and some people are just naturally more geared towards the feeling and kind of the abstract approach. I would consider myself someone who likes both. And I feel like good logic and science will only take you to the realization that we just have to feel and see what happens. Like it takes you to the magic, because it will always hit a stopping point. And the feeling and and the magic without any understanding of it, also can only go so far. So I feel like when used together, they can both really amplify the beauty of both paths, of both approaches. Um, and a lot of times in my life, I see people who are very stuck in just the logic or the science of it, and I really see that they're missing so much of the magic. And some people are way off the rails on the magic piece, and they're too far out there, and they need to be a little bit more grounded. So I just really appreciate this question, and I see them both as two sides of the same coin that can really either enhance each other, or when taken into isolation can really kind of take from each other, or maybe even oppose each other and bring some tension.
Mm. Mhm.
To build on what you said, Travis, I think for me, it was just this beautiful example of how focusing too much on one, like you lose then like the entire essence of the thing. Like it doesn't give you a full picture unless you look at it all. It would be like saying about a human being, like they're really good at math, and then that's all you're going to allow them to be when they're an entire being beyond that.
Mm.
Yeah, I love this too. I think it's really about being able to hold two different ideas at the same time and being able to have two seemingly opposing worldviews, um, and hold them equally at the same time. It's like very, very Zen, very Taoist, very like, can we appreciate all the fine details of everything? Can we know about the microbiome in the gut? And can we continue to learn about all these like very, very teeny tiny parts, and then also put it away and, drink a cup of tea, which, is more than all the words can say. And as a massage therapist who teaches anatomy, but also touches the body and is involved with people's emotions and experience. I feel this on a deep way in my work, and then also in my tea practice. There's like in the decade or so that I've been practicing with tea, there's been the same push and pull of my experience of tea and going deep into reading all the books and feeling like I'm an imposter if I don't understand every tiny detail of it. And then you know, yeah, going away from that and realizing my experience is the most important thing, and just, being present for that. And yeah, it's very beautiful.
Hearing everyone share, I can't help but to see how that in the book is also embodied by Haley and her, um, having two scientific parents as her adoptive parents, and then obviously her mom and her grandma being the tea gurus without even knowing they are, because they have been cultivating this beautiful tea from the wild trees in their lineage as a tradition. And just it feels like in the book she embodies, or she has the potential to embody both of those with as she goes live her life story, and come full circle from where she's from and she has had the opportunity to be through her adoptive parents. So just by the professions that her biological and adopted parents, like it made me think of like in the book as a character, she's the potential embodiment of both the scientific and the philosophical and just like intuitive aspect, poetic aspect of it.
I just had I just had a thought, which is at the very end of the book. I'm sorry, Julie. I almost don't want to share this, but you can silence me if you want. But um, this I'll try to say little without saying everything. Anyways, there's a moment where when Haley arrives, everybody else who's finished the book will know what I'm talking about, where she arrives in the grove, and Leon is literally inside the tree, which is just so extraordinary, right? And she's almost being birthed back out of the tree, just as as Haley was born in that grove. Talk about like a full circle Enso thing going on. And the moment that Haley arrives there, the mother holds stillness and eye contact for like a long time, which is kind of like the stillness of tea. She's embodying it in the moment while inside the tree, right? And then she comes down, but there's a moment where Haley is just flushed with emotion. She says it rises like a warmth in her chest, and she describes a physiological experience, an emotional, physiological, physical experience of warmth in the chest and her eyes widening. And it's literally like she's describing the way people describe the experience of drinking an old growth tree or an old tea for the first time, right? The physical experience of it. And then she comes up and she recognizes in the mother's face, right, her own. And I just think that that's such a what an extraordinary way to tie together the magic of the physical experience of tea, the sensational experience of what is happening in the opening of the chest, the brightening of the eyes, the heart opening, etc. With, there's no amount of scientific study that would have informed Haley having a more significant experience arriving at the oldest tea tree she'd ever been to, right? There's no amount of knowledge could have informed that, you know? Yet it was her scientific inquiry and her curiosity that brought her all the way, that got her there, right? So it's like this interesting thing where it's not either or. And I think that's really what Tea Master Sun understands, that can't be reduced to like tasting notes or chemistry or processing, that he's trying to imbue and impart to Leon when she's first studying tea. So he's teaching her about tasting notes and processing and what to look for in a tea and how to distinguish, develop a palate, etc. But he's always ending with, things like if you don't love tea, you can't make good tea. Like what really drives this? So he seems to, as a tea master, embody both in a very balanced way, right? And there's a passage on page 190, which I won't go into it now because I want to make sure we have time to cover some other things, but you might mark it because he says some very wise things there, where he says taste requires a lifetime of dedication. And then he goes on to talk about the study of tea and Taoists and Buddhists and how different traditions relate to tea. Um, and there's one other passage that I encourage you to go back to on page 173. So 173 and 191, which um, which kind of I think just shares some wisdom that feels very essential, sort of after the book. And then in the final chapter, um, Haley encounters Huigon, the return of sweetness. And there's a really wonderful passage where she talks about her first kind of real bodily, emotional experience of tea after studying it scientifically, you know? Um, and I think all of those really speak beautifully to where science and poetry kind of meet and what does it mean to have a reverential relationship. Um, it's funny because at Living Tea, of course, we suggest and emphasize people have a practice. But then so many people get into tea and they might drink tea every day for 10 years, but they don't know anything about, and this is a generalization, but they don't spend any time on what makes a Lao Banjiang versus a Yiwu versus a Nanuo tea different? Like, what am I really tasting? How are tannins contributing to bitterness? Or, they just like how it feels and they like the taste and they like the stillness. There's nothing wrong with that at all, of course. But if you're only having that experience, then you're sort of having. So part of the reverence is taking the time to also learn and study a bit more about the knowledge side of it. But then there's other people I know who just have a knowledge-based relationship to tea, and it's all about tasting notes and it's all about vintages. And they might not be transformed by tea very much. It might not really change their lives. It's just something they enjoy. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But I think, like Travis said, bringing those two together can actually enrich and fill out the picture in a way that's really, really wonderful. It can give you a much deeper level of appreciation and reverence. Um, okay, moving on. So, okay, my third question is, what does it mean to approach tea and the people and places behind it with reverence? So, reverence begins where admiration becomes obligation. And so this speaks to what I was just saying, like to learn provenance, um, to practice reciprocity, to allow different traditions of tea to remain larger than our use or interpretation of it. So, so this kind of talks about responsibility. Like if you're taking on a life of tea, what are the responsibilities of tea collectors, of vendors, of people traveling, of tea drinkers, of sharing tea with others? How do we honor the sources of tea? How do we remain students? It's really about like one's approach. I think oftentimes we drink tea, but we don't really, I mean, I've struggled with this. How do we really honor how much goes in from the leaf of an old growth tree, maybe to the storage for 20 years, all the way through to sharing it with others? How do we treat all of that with reverence? Or with responsibility? What does it mean to responsibly steward a relationship to tea?
I think that's a really good question. I think we have to identify what is reverence. How do you show something reverence? Is it that you give it space and quietness? Do you handle it with care and appreciation? Do you like what is reverence? And that's actually a big thing for me because I'm a yoga teacher and I'm also really stepping into what is sacred. So it's kind of those two, like what's sacred, what's reverence, and how do we show it? Well, we show it just exactly what you're doing there. You pour with intention. I guess that's it. It's intention. What is behind what you're doing in anything in life? So you're having a conversation with someone, or you're in nature. Are you in nature to lovingly take the tea leaves down? Or are you in there just to clear it, make money, get in there, do it, right? That's kind of was clear in the book for me when she goes back to her village, Leanne, and she sees how much it's changed, right? And the different approaches to it. And so I think it's always the intention behind what we're doing.
I think one of the questions I've sat with over time is how do we develop, what does it mean to be in relationship with tea? Um, what do we do for it? What do we do for it? In what ways are we serving something larger than us? And what does it mean to practice reciprocity? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. To be honest, when I think like halfway through the book, I actually felt a sense of guilt for the enjoyment I was having from tea and not and being very ignorant to the amount of work and effort that went into actually making it. So there was this like kind of like gut punch of like, oh man, I've been really not reverent, not grateful. And maybe that's for me what it comes down to is like when I'm enjoying it, can I just have this like gratitude in my heart for uh yeah, for the people who worked so hard to make it available to me. But to be quite honest, like I was very yeah, just ignorant to this um, like how difficult it is to be led into the experience of this tribe was pretty profound and yeah, it was kind of like a wake up call for me. So maybe for me, it's like can I have that gratitude? And maybe this is where knowledge does come in because if I never read this book, if I never did the research to understand where it came from, and maybe that's a whole other topic is like how many things do we consume today where we are completely detached from the origin or where they came from? Maybe that's what it really brought up for me. But to hear some of the stories of the tribe was yeah, pretty profound.
Um, I uh, I think living in Canada and doing a lot of ceremony with Indigenous elders and people here and looking at the way that we treat our land and create respect for the traditional ways of the people who occupied this land far, far before my ancestors did, um, has been a really amazing uh, guide for me in learning how to respect and be more reverent to tea and the culture, another culture that I also don't belong to. It's the healing work of truth and reconciliation and doing the work of living in reciprocity with the land that I currently occupy has helped me to deepen my tea practice and reverence when there were definitely times where I thought I shouldn't be appreciating that this is not my lineage. This is not my, I've gone through a lot of those ups and downs with this. So I think reverence is cultivated over a long time. And like you said, through reciprocity, through giving back in whatever way. I was in a sweat lodge ceremony a couple weeks ago, and we were asked to bring gifts, and usually you bring tobacco. I brought tea. I brought some beautiful teas, some expensive teas, some teas that I know for me are so valuable, and that was my offering. And it felt uh, it was more than for me than buying tobacco from from the store and bringing it in. It would this was my way of like giving back in ceremony. And yeah, it was a very healing moment. And actually, one of the things that came up in the lodge was the elder said, we're holding baggage. It's time to set it down, set it down, set it down. And that was the prayer that kept coming through, and it was super beautiful. And this is like another aspect of this, bringing this, making this lineage, respecting its origins, learning more about the cultures, but recognizing that the earth is one earth. No matter where you live, no matter what place you occupy, that land, you are a steward of it. And whatever you're purchasing, whatever you're, buying, food, tea, tobacco, are you are you doing your due diligence? Are you, spending money where it should be spent? And yeah, lots of things.
I wanna I wanna tie this into a final question. If we go 10 minutes over, is that okay with everybody? Um, which is, you know, the book ends again. I don't know why the scene keeps coming up. I just think it's like as we're talking, it's more and more poignant. But with Leon tending quietly to the tree, right? She's tending quietly to it. And Amma, this theme throughout the book is saying no men are allowed in this grove. She's saying nobody else is allowed to see the grove, but specifically no men. And Site is a woman, but she has that different mentality of like tear out all the trees, put in coffee, put in rubber, even if it destroys the environment. And she's willing to be duplicitous and to throw away a lifelong friendship for profit, for short-term profit, right? Um, and it's interesting, right? Because at the end, um, you can tell Leon still like loves her friend Site, but she also just feels so betrayed by her that 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 rift will never really recover. And this question that I have is when tea becomes valuable to the wider world, what is preserved and what is endangered? Um, you know, a lot of the books about the poor boom and about, right now the poor market in China is around $24 billion. And they're expected to get to 40 billion by 2030. In the US, it's between 200 and 300 million. So it's very early and fragmented. And, but, like things like matcha, right? Like matcha, there's currently a worldwide matcha shortage. And part of that is driven by first the US and then Europe's all this overconsumption of matcha. All of a sudden there's matcha lattes on every Starbucks menu. And we've just seen this in all these different ways. So, the poor boom that's talked about in the book, it shows that preservation and exploitation can arise from the same act of valuation. So the market can make old trees worth protecting while also making them vulnerable to extraction and extinction, right? So there's this fascinating thing of like, so the question is, what does the poor trade liberate economically for Leon and her community? Like, does it really help the Aka people in that village that now they have plumbing and washing machines and, you know, the way of life has changed? Or has it actually created division and pulled the community apart? And what's been lost in throwing out some of their old traditions versus how has it helped them as a community? Um, like the novel sort of asks us to choose between tradition and modernity, and not to choose between them, but it's like that's one of the constant tensions. So the community is uplifted by this growth and the poor boom, but at the same time, something's lost. So like there's just something fascinating in that tension that I'm curious about, you know? So the question is, what is preserved and what is endangered as tea becomes valuable in the wider world?
To me, it feels like through Leanne and her experience of not going home for so many years and believing her home was preserved in all the traditions that she was raised in, and then going back and seeing all this modernity and all the changes within her community and their traditions, it feels like, in a way, not only in the book, but I feel it happens for a lot of us. And even with what Erin was sharing, it comes across to me as if we have this idea that tradition and like lineage and being that kept together through time gives us a sense of safety. It feels like, and it feels like for her coming back and seeing all this like modernity, it took away that safety of tradition. And in a sense, it's kind of what you're saying, like the tradition, in a way, in Amma, it's like what's kept this wild trees alive with the golden thread, you know? And then modernity and the GPS is like, it might take it away, you know? But yeah, it's an amazing book in the sense that it does bring that question forward in a very evident way of how we as a collective within special things like wild trees and traditions and people's lives, how, yeah, I don't know, I think it's like an open-ended question of kind of what you are asking of how can we modernize and still keep traditions that keep us safe in a way, but then again, like they're the good thing about them modernizing is like very clear example, like you don't have to kill twins anymore, and for like because that was a huge like for Deja and her husband, I don't remember his name, like it changed their life forever, like they literally ended their life in a way. So it is a very interesting expression of that question that you posed that comes throughout the whole book all the time of like how do we gauge that leap forward and preserve and with reverence what has kept us safe, but in the same time it doesn't keep us fully safe, not all of us, like it's so interesting. And that in the book does a great job, but I don't know if it doesn't answer anything, but it makes us question that, and I love the questioning of it.
I think it's particularly relevant now with what's happening with AI and how quickly it's just like just handing over so much to be like, okay, now you're running the show kind of thing. And it's like, how much is lost in that? I mean, I think there's this strange thing that I was writing about recently, which is that like every new technology, every new iPhone, every new version of your MacBook Pro or whatever, like comes out and we just tend to kind of like adopt it. It's like, okay, I guess this is now what I'm doing, or now I communicate through these social media apps, or now I do this thing, right? Like, and this question of whenever we bring something new into our life, we often don't recognize what we're also giving up. An example of this, which is silly, but like this isn't technology, but I got a puppy like a year ago because my 6-year-old son kind of like wanted a puppy and I kind of did. And it's like how much I gave up in bringing something into my life because this dog is a handful. So like we bring in some new technology and it's like, but what are you giving up? This hand's receiving something, then what are you giving away? And with technology, the bigger and bigger and bigger technology, the more it comes into our lives and consumes our lives. Like we couldn't have this meeting together without this technology. So there's like these blessings, but then we spend all day, a lot of us, sitting at a computer instead of being outside or something, you know? So it's like it's this strange balance, and I think we all have to kind of find our own relationship to it. Um, and I think that tea, like getting tea, going out into nature, drinking tea, like allowing it to be a consistent reminder to like go back to what has been here for much, much longer than all of our silly technology can help be one of the counterbalancing influences in our lives so that we're not just consumed with efficiency and doing things faster and this pervasive influence of modernity, right? Because modernity moves so fast and it seems so compelling, but like we just give so much up. Um, I want to kind of share a final note on, yeah. Oh, so somebody want to say something? Um, on Nanaimo Mountain and kind of leave folks with a question to carry with you, maybe as you're thinking on this book. The first thing is, over the last couple months, I really wanted to find some nice Nanaimo tea just to share with this group. And I love teas from Nanaimo, but I haven't had any in quite a while, like with Living Tea. And a friend of mine just a couple weeks ago sent me some tea. I was talking to him about the book because I was like really moved by it, and he said, "Oh, I think I might have some old Nano cakes." And I just like a week ago came across these mini tochas from 1988, and they're quite rare, and they come from the mountain, of course, at the center of the novel. Um, and they're from 1988. And I don't remember when Leon is born, but it predates all of that modernity coming in. And I drank this tea, and like all the things that I love about a good Nanaimo tea are there, and they're just extraordinary. So he had a small quantity of it, and I said, "Could you make some of this available to a small group?" And he said, "Sure." So Shanna can maybe put the link in there. It's just available to people who read the book with us, but there's some 1988 mini tochas, and they're just such a wonderful tea. um, and really inexpensive for the age from 1988. And then also, he also had some Maucha produced in 2006 from the Aka tribe, and so it's more for people who like younger pu'er because it's from 2006. It's called At the Threshold. It's right at that point where between a young pu'er and a mid-aged sheng pu'er. So both of them are sheng pu'er, and it's also like 35 bucks or something. And so I just mentioned these because they're just available here. But it'd be nice if you want to try two teas from Nanaimo Mountain produced by Aka people from 2006 and 1988 to see how that tea transforms over time. Um, and I was just thrilled to find them. And if you want to explore the actual tea produced by the people in the book, that's a nice way to explore those. Um, and you know, I've been to this region of Jishwangbana, but not specifically to Nanaimo. I would really like to go. And it's not like a single garden. It's really this whole kind of mountain landscape in Munghai County. And those like villages there and those forests and those old tea gardens, they literally carry generations of Aka and Hani knowledge. You think about how much knowledge is lost with Amma, right? If she doesn't and the Puer boom brought so much opportunity and wealth, but it also brought all this competition and extraction and rapid change. And I think I think the setting of like Nano, it really matters because it's neither modernity or tradition is presented as this pure thing, right? Like modernity isn't this pure wonderful thing for the community, and tradition, as Roberta was pointing out, is not all wonderful, right? There's some very old practices, traditional practices that in our modern sensibility just seem barbaric kind of, right? Um, so I just think that the question that I kind of wanted to leave everybody with is what has this book caused you to see differently about tea? Like Travis shared such a wonderful reflection about like, oh wow, so much goes into this, into finding these teas, processing them, and through tea about culture and memory and family and belonging. So culture, memory, family, and belonging. What in the book caused you to see something differently about tea? Um, I'm going to leave it with that. And I really want to just take a moment to thank Lisa C., first of all, for writing it, for all the people in the novel, like what rich characters, for all these tribes. There's so many tribes in Yunnan that produce these incredible, beautiful teas. And for the people who are trying to preserve these older traditions and to try to represent tea with reverence and not treat it as a commodity. Um, and just to try to bring some of that reverence into our continued relationship to this practice and the way that we share it with people. And trying to bring some of that awareness to people who you introduce tea to, just that so much goes into it and their entire ways of life that are behind, a nice pour tea. Um, and hopefully, one of the goals of Living Tea is to guide trips in Yunnan and to travel over there and bring people to the places of origin. And we recently moved the company to Boulder, and we're doing more sits there. And if you're anywhere in the Boulder region or you want to travel, at the end of August, we're doing 6 days, a 6-day exhibition, 3 days in Boulder, 3 days in Denver. And we have 5 ceramicists producing beautiful wares, and we'll be doing tea ceremonies basically all day, multiple sits a day for 3 days in Boulder, 3 days in Denver. And we're really looking to share tea and to celebrate a reverential relationship to tea. And I think they're going to be really special events. So even if you can't make it, but you know anybody in those areas, we could use support in promoting them because these are our first events that we're doing on the Front Range in Colorado. Okay, I think I've said the things I need to say. It looks like